Welcome back to the Armchair Attorney podcast. I'm your host, Matthew Leffler, real life lawyer and an adjunct law professor at Michigan State University College of Law. Big things have happened in the world of the law if you've been following. Last week, tens of thousands of men and women sat for the bar exam, the test that you take after you go to law school. Now, they'll say the bar exam isn't really trained for when you're in law school. That's probably true. It's 2 days of intense testing. It's been 15 years since I sat for the bar, and I remember it fondly. And as best you can remember a test where everything matters. It's a pass-fail exam as far as I know, but ultimately, after you pass the bar exam, the next phase is figuring out, what are you going to do? What's the plan? You usually wait for your results to come in, and then you have to do the next thing, which is swear in to the state where you passed the bar. And then, dear friend, you're a real life lawyer. And the question is, what do you do? What do lawyers do? When I teach my supply chain law class, I have the opportunity to work with second and third year law students, the ones who are getting ready for the bar, that wonderful test that's just hovering in the future, just on the horizon. The world of being a practicing lawyer is massive. There are so many things you can do. You can work as a small law firm at a big law firm. You can work in government. You can work in regulation. You can do just about anything with a law degree. And this podcast today, we'll have a great guest with us. We'll have Pam Braicher, and Pam is the Deputy General Counsel of the American Trucking Associations. We're going to talk all about her legal career and her journey in the supply chain. But as you all know, you've been following along for a little bit, we love talking with lawyers because ultimately lawyers are the tip of the spear for innovation. They protect you. They're your advocate. They are fiduciaries, meaning they put their interests behind that of their client. It's an incredibly challenging profession full of a lot of different things. And in this little segment we're putting together as we talk with different lawyers, these are the office hours. We're going to try to help you understand what kind of roles you can do in the world of law and supply chain. So I am so excited for bringing Pam on. She'll be here in just a moment. Before we get to that, I have to thank the sponsors that make all of this possible. For those of you who have been following along, we have our good friends over at Genlogs. Genlogs, setting the new standard of care for freight intelligence, combating fraud, and helping you understand the very important question, dude, where's my trailer? Where did it go? Their network of cameras all across the United States monitoring the highways that our freight is moving every single day, millions of pictures every single day, helping people understand where is that stuff. Because I'll tell you, we love our stuff. And Genlogs is doing a lot of really interesting stuff to help you figure out what is going on in the supply chain. And of course, I have our wonderful friends at DAT, Dial a Truck. Since 1978, DAT has been helping people find freight, discovering loads, and as they've gone over the last couple of months, building one of the most trusted marketplaces for freight in the United States and North America more generally. This is incredible. Earlier this week, we sat down with Bill Driegert. He's now over at DAT, but before that, he was working with Convoy within Flexport, and DAT bought that for an estimated $250 million. That is absolutely incredible. And our next podcast coming up is going to have another DAT alum, Ken Adamo, Chief of Analytics for DAT, and my colleague at Michigan State, our good friend, Professor Dr. Jason Miller. We're going to be asking some really important questions. Specifically, should I be panicking? Really, I don't know. I don't know if I'm supposed to be panicking. Maybe I am. Hopefully they can help me understand whether or not I should. Okay. All that's done. We've talked about our advertisers. We've talked about the future and the past. Now we're talking about the present. I am so excited for my next guest. I met Pam Bracher when I was at the Reliance Partners Trucking Matters seminar. I have been working with Reliance Partners for many years, ensuring my company, and it's been incredible getting to know other people in the space. Pam today serves as the Deputy General Counsel for the American Trucking Associations, the largest trucking advocacy group in the entire country. If you don't know who the ATA is, then you probably don't know what trucking is. If you do know trucking, you probably know the ATA. But her background is expansive. She's been all over in terms of in-house counsel roles in private practice. And so for you today, we're going to be talking with Pam. So without further ado, Pam Bracher, how are you, Pam?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
I'm so excited to have you. When I met you at Reliance, I was like, I need to get Pam on the podcast. So let me ask you, for those people who do not know anything about you, who are you and what do you do?
Well, the who are you is a very existential question. And the who I am has a lot more to do with who I am personally than professionally. I'm an only child with an only child. Grew up in East Tennessee, love the mountains and the lakes, and still married to the man that I've been married to for soon to be 35 years. And we have one daughter. And I have a good relationship with my parents, and I love living still in East Tennessee. So that's who I am. I pride myself as a volunteer, a wife, and a mother, and a daughter. But professionally, I've been a lawyer now for 27, 28 years.
It goes by fast, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah. And I started out getting a master's degree kind of in denial that I needed to be in law school. But by the time I was getting close to getting that master's degree, I realized I needed to be in law school. So
what was the catalyst that said, okay, I want to go to law school? What was it that you were looking to get out of law school?
Well, it wasn't so much. What happened was, so I was lucky when I was in ninth grade. I grew up in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. And so when I was in ninth grade, Keys Philhauer and Lynn Berkey, coaches at Robertsville Junior High School, taught a ninth grade civics class. And that was very much you learn by doing. So, we didn't just learn about the UN, we became the UN. Okay. We didn't learn about the civil justice system, we became the civil justice system. We didn't learn about the Electoral College, we became the Electoral College. And so I played a defense attorney in a mock case during the civil justice system. It was about, believe it or not, it was about insurance rates. And I had an actual insurance broker on personal lines was my expert witness. And so we did this mock case, and everyone said, there were lawyers in the audience sort of evaluating the students doing all of their little mock trials. And everyone kept saying, you need to be a lawyer. And if there is one thing, again, going back to the personal side of me, I don't like to be told what to do. And so that started this whole, from ninth grade on,
I'll never do it.
I will never do it. Right. And then at some point I was working as a paralegal when I was going to grad school. And finally, at some point I said, your stubbornness will be the death of you. So just own up to the fact that you really do want to be in law school and go to law school.
Did you have family that were lawyers, or you're just like, this is okay?
No, my dad has a PhD in mechanical engineering. My dad is first generation college.
Okay.
Had scholarships. My dad is actually both my grandfathers were delivery truck drivers. Yeah. And my dad is first generation college. He had scholarships to a private high school and then college, and then went on to grad school, got a PhD in mechanical engineering. He was, ROTC, served in the Air Force. So lots of programs gave him access to doors he wouldn't have otherwise had open to him. And my mom was a fantastic secretary and executive assistant her whole career. So she never went to college. So that's my background. Yeah.
My father started his first job out of college working for Roadway back in 1976. And so he spent like 15 years at Roadway, spent some time at Airborne, then started his own company in the early 90s. And his mentality was, you go to college, you have to go to college, but you got to go to grad school. Like he's like, you're not going to do what I do. You're not going to be in this space. And at the time, I only knew of transportation, meaning it meant my father was gone for half the year. Like it meant dad was on the road half the year. I was like, one thing I don't want to do is be on the road all the time. And I also didn't want to be an adult yet. So I was like, I'll go to law school. Now you go to law school. What was your experience like? Did you enjoy the process, or was it like, was it terrifying and brutal?
I thoroughly enjoyed it. I had a blast. I mean, my gosh, I rocked civil procedure and con law and blew it out of the park too with tax. That was odd because but I did have one teacher. He was the teacher of a labor and employment law class. And he was the only one that did the traditional Socratic method.
Oh,
The other law professors didn't kind of used a hybrid, didn't really still live in that traditional way of teaching the law. And I hated that class. And there was just something about the Socratic method that just did not gel with how my brain works.
everyone
And
likes to be called randomly. We love when we're just like sitting there. So like for the folks who have never experienced like what a Socratic method style class is, like what you're doing is you're in a room with a number of people. Maybe it's like 20, maybe it's 100, maybe it's more than that. And the professor is speaking to you and you're paying attention as best you can, but you have no idea who they will call on. And once you're called on, at least when my time in law school, you could pass once. But if you did pass,
yeah,
they would remember that. And so
yeah.
everyone's like on pins and needles. And the best feeling in the world, I think, at least at the time, was after you were called on, you knew the answer and they moved on. You're like, I am done for like another couple weeks, maybe.
Yeah, totally agree with you. And I probably became a better person or a better lawyer for that experience, but that was the one class that, and it truly was because he was diehard Socratic method. Like,
My favorite course, I have a lot of favorite courses, but I love civil procedure just like you. And civil procedure for me was a Socratic method class. Professor Kennedy, he's still teaching at Michigan State. He is brutal. He is brutal. But what I love about civil procedure is it teaches you to figure out, why are we here? Like, why this court at this moment with this judge? Like, how did we get here? And that is so useful for any problem you ever face as an adult. Is like, how did we get here? We have to go back and see exactly how we made it. So you
right.
go through law school. Did you know you wanted to practice in Tennessee, or were you thinking like, what were your ambitions after law school?
Well, the short answer is I had been working as a paralegal at King and Spalding in Atlanta and had a
Great
really,
firm.
yeah, great firm, had a really good experience and a mentor by the name of Chilton Varner. And met some fabulous people while I was there. And there are pros and cons with being at a firm of that size. But at the time that I made the decision to go to law school, I was married and my husband had changed careers and we were living in Cincinnati. So I was at the I attended law school at the University of Cincinnati.
Okay.
And so I just knew that I didn't want to stay in Ohio. And so the deal was, I'll take you to Ohio. He was going to get his career started, and then he was going to bring me back south, somewhere south of the Mason-Dixon line. So the short answer to your question is no, I never wanted to sit for the Ohio bar. I always knew I was going to be sitting for a bar somewhere south of the Mason-Dixon line. And it ended up being Chattanooga, Tennessee. I sat for the Tennessee and the Georgia bars. But I knew enough to know that the largeness of King and Spalding was probably not the right fit for me, even though Chilton was still practicing when I was ready to start practicing. And interestingly enough, the University of Cincinnati and the city of Chattanooga had a connection at that time. And there used to be a scholarship that was promoted by the Benwood Foundation, which is a private foundation in Chattanooga, where every year 2 graduates of the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga would go tuition free to the University of Cincinnati Law School.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was a complete fluke. I didn't even know this when I was up at the law school. And as a result, there were all these UC alums in Chattanooga. So it was super easy for me
Interesting.
to get job interviews and offers for summer associate positions. And because of that network, the alums came back and they stayed and they practiced it. They were practicing in Chattanooga. And so I ended up at the law firm of Miller and Martin, which is one of the larger firms in Chattanooga. And culturally, it was just a great fit for me. And I'm very fond of those years. And I'm very blessed that I had those years.
How long did you work at that law firm?
So I was there for 8 years. I was coming up, probably would have been close to, I bet they would have voted. At that time, I think Miller and Martin had an 8-year partnership track. So I probably left mid-year of the year that I might have come up for partnership vote. And I had a young child at that time, and it was a lot. And so I made the decision to go in-house and not stay at the firm.
This is so fascinating. So I'm going to unpack a few of the things you mentioned as we walk through this initial kind of beginning of your career. For the non-lawyers out there, King & Spalding is one of the largest law firms in the world. This is a massive firm. We would call that big law being like these big Vault 100, like really specialized. If you think of like the ATAs, like top 100 logistics companies, like that's the kind of way to think of King. It's a massive firm, does everything, does every single thing. You then chose to work for a smaller firm, but still big in the area. Were you doing mostly like defense work, or were you doing plaintiff work?
Yeah.
Or what kind of work were you doing?
I've always defense. King & Spalding was a defense firm. I am a defense person. I have several good friends that are plaintiffs attorneys, but I don't know, my brain doesn't work in that way. I'm not a very litigious person. So I think that's why I end up more on the defense side, because I'm pissed off that somebody chose to file a lawsuit. But so I've always done defense work. At Miller and Martin, I was a defense attorney in the litigation department. I did tort litigation primarily, represented the railroad in what's called Federal Employers Liability Act cases, represented a major bottler of soda products in some of their contract and white collar crime issues, defended manufacturers of mobile homes around consumer protection, breach of warranty type issues relating to the sales of their mobile homes. So that was sort of my bread and butter, not trucking at all. I guess railroad was transportation adjacent.
Absolutely. Well, and then ultimately bottling and any type of consumer product somehow gets you back to transportation. And again, for the folks who are new to the world of how lawyers operate, so plaintiff attorneys, they typically operate on, in many cases, not always, but many cases, contingent fees. So they're working on behalf of a plaintiff where they're not being paid anything, but they'll eventually get a piece of the settlement or the verdict, usually 1/3, but it varies depending on the type of case. The defense side, we're working on usually transactional billing, hourly rates. What was your minimum charge? 0.25, or are you doing 0.1s? Like what do you remember that?
Building walls of 6-minute bricks.
Yeah, okay. There you go. So this is again, for non-lawyers and for law students who are looking to become lawyers or new grads who've taken the bar. In the defense world and most private practice transactional work, you live and die by the 6-minute interval. And to most firms will say, like, you want 8 hours of billable time a day. That will probably take you 10 hours of actual work. It's just, you can't bill for everything. But it's that review email, 0.1, send correspondence to client, 0.2. You start thinking everything in terms of these intervals of 6 minutes. It's incredible.
When I started practicing law, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but when I started practicing law, they didn't have the software platforms that they had today. So you had like a sheet of paper, and the day was divided in 6-minute increments, and you would draw a line down to mark off how many 6-minute segments, and you'd write the Loeffler case or something, some clue word, and then you would go on and do that. And then towards the end of my time at Miller and Martin, I think we got a software package where you could click on a clock and click it off, and it would automatically generate the time that you spent. And then you would write some keywords about what you did for that client during that time block. I'm sure it's way more advanced now at law firms than that, but that was back in the day.
Well, it's fascinating because like that is one of the aspects of being a lawyer that you're generally not taught in law school is how
No.
to bill. And realistically, that is what the like your senior associates and your managing partners, that's what they're looking at. I mean, they want you to do good work product, but they assume you'll do good work, but they know you're young. It's about capturing your time. And I'm sure other law schools have programs like, hey, here's a workshop on how to properly bill for this type of litigation or that type of matter. But it's interesting. So you decide to go in-house. Did the trucking company come knocking, or did you go applying? How did that go?
My daddy was reading the newspaper and clipped an ad. Don't you love it when your parents clip an ad or a newspaper article?
You should do this thing.
Here, you should do this. And so daddy came to me with the clipped job ad, and he said, I saw this. Maybe this is something you might want to think about. And I think he was worried about me because he felt like I was burning the candle from both ends. My husband worked. I worked, and quite honestly, again, loved my years at Miller and Martin. I had only good, positive, wonderful, kind things to say. But you don't work just 40 hours when you work at a law firm. And I think my dad was just worried about me. And of course, my mom and dad were my daughter's only babysitter all the years that she was growing up. So they had a lot of good quality time with her. But I think he just thought, hey, maybe her life would be easier if she was in-house. So yeah, so he saw the ad and brought it to me, and I applied, and it coincidentally, at that time, the trucking company that I went to work for was US Express, which is based in Chattanooga. And at that time that I started there, it was publicly held. And one of the board members at US Express was a friend of mine, only I didn't know that he was a board member. I mean, people laugh when I say this. I truly didn't know that. I had no clue. And I just casually mentioned to him that I was going to be applying for the job. And unbeknownst to me, he called my future boss and said, if you don't hire her, that would be a mistake.
It's good to have friends in high places. I think to pull on this thread a little bit about like the transition from private practice to in-house. So I think your point really is well taken. Like the expectation in most private practice, and again, it varies firm to firm. Don't take this as like the gospel of how private practice works, but you're valued as a member as you contribute. Now you bring in clients or you bill lots of hours. And if you're hitting 40 hours of billable time a week, that's probably not going to work for most firms. Most firms are going to want to see, and again, it varies place to place, 50 to 60 hours of billable time. And it's hard. It is a brutal, it's tough. And I think what we see as lawyers is we are uniquely susceptible to anxiety and depression and all these other health maladies just because of the nature of what we do. That you have to take a certain moment to step back and say, okay, what am I working towards? If you're motivated by money, then being a lawyer can be awesome because there's so much money available. But if you value, in certain cases, like family time and home time and just quality ability to kind of get away. I'll give this example. I worked for a big firm at one point, as many of us have, and the rule was every 4 or 5 hours you check your email. And that's on weekends, that's on holidays, that's on time off. It just, you have to be available. And the freight brokers of this community and transportation people also know that experience. Like you don't stop because you're off. Freight doesn't stop. So you apply for this job, you get into US Express. What do you start doing within that company?
So at that time, US Express was sort of evolving its claims management or risk management department. It had started out, as many trucking companies do, with just a traditional sort of insurance program with a deductible. And as the fleet grew and the company grew, they decided to take on more risk themselves. So they, they expanded the value of their deductible. So they started out probably, I'm making this up, but with a $3,000 deductible, and they eventually worked up to $500,000 and $1 million and yada yada yada.
Exactly.
And as they became more, as they took on more risk, as they kept a higher deductible, decided to develop a captive insurer, they decided they were going to build out an in-house claims department. So I was hired at that time as the director of litigation, and it was my job to be sort of national coordinating counsel for all of the outside attorneys that were doing our accident claims and litigation. And it was my job to make sure that all of our discovery responses were uniform and consistent. I was prepping the company 30B6 witnesses, or even if a company employee was serving as a fact witness, I was with defense counsel. I'm going to mediations, I'm negotiating settlements, I'm making recommendations to the senior management and C-suite. Do we settle this case? Do we take it to trial? So we had a team of in-house claims examiners that were sort of the day-to-day first person that you would see working on resolving, personal injury, wrongful death, bodily injury type claims, or property damage claims, cargo claims. As it moved into litigation, I got more involved with those in-house claims examiners and became, part of that team, so that we were, it was more of a group effort with our outside counsel.
There's two things I want to kind of touch on as you kind of describe this building out this very professionalized claims department. One thing is, and this should shock no one, but trucking companies are never not in litigation. Like, trucking companies are always being sued. Now, sometimes the trucking company is at fault. Sometimes it is someone who just smashes in the back of your trailer, but there's never a time you are not in litigation. Like, if anyone thinks that a trucking company has like one case a year, this is probably dozens of big cases and maybe hundreds of small cases, whether it's cargo claims or everything. So that is like just a modern trucking phenomenon. You are never not in litigation. Is that right? Like, you're always being sued.
Well, you're always having claims made against you.
Exactly.
We were certainly very aggressive at trying to be proactive in terms of resolving that claim with a claimant before a lawsuit is filed. But you're right. I mean, at any given time when I was at US Express, there were probably 100 to 120 claims in litigation.
And that's not the workers' comp claims, because the
workers' comp
workers' comp is sitting there humming along, as it always tends to do.
Yeah. Workers' comp was totally it was in our department, but there's auto liability, commercial auto liability, and then there was workers' comp.
Exactly. Now,
and then Keys Dam was the other sort of leg of that three-leg stool, right?
But the nice thing about at least for physical damage, it's just usually property, and it's money. It's not the other part, which I think workers' comp clearly ties into this, but the liability is definitely there. One of the things that I always tell my students and people who are not lawyers who think they want to become lawyers, the worst day of a trucking company is when something catastrophic happens, whether it's a physical damage or loss of life or something horrible. That's like the worst day ever. In the role that you're in the role that I had, that is every day.
Yeah.
Every single day is looking at horrifying accidents and terrible things, and you can't unring the bell. And if you stare into that abyss long enough, you get changed. And we're not the same as doctors in emergency rooms. I get that. We're not the same as like first responders going into really dangerous situations, or military folks. But there's an aspect that we see that the rest of the world doesn't. Like, you see the headline. We don't just see the headline. We see every single medical record for the next, X amount of time. So as you're in this role, so you did the defense work in private practice, but now you're in-house. Do you wrestle with what you see? Does that follow you home, or how do you deal with the pressure and stress of that aspect of the job?
Maybe means that I'm somehow a heartless, cold person, but I've always been good at segregation or segmentation. I don't know what the right word is. I've always been good at sort of, and I'm not someone who is um, particularly emotional in my private personal life. So maybe I'm just too stoic. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I need therapy. I don't know. But no, seriously, I was always good about, to your point, medical records, seeing photographs, talking to injured people, talking to our drivers who, sometimes people would choose to commit suicide by truck, and it
Yeah.
impacted our truck drivers greatly. And I had a lot of those conversations, and they were very meaningful to me, and they shaped probably who I am, but I was always sort of good at, this is that thing over here, and I'm now going over here and doing this.
I think that, like, I have a really good friend who's a doctor, and he was an emergency room, level 1 trauma center, and this idea of compartmentalization, like that you can take what's happening, you can be empathetic, you can help the person, but then you have to be able to say, this is set away. This is not who I am. This is what I like. This is not my life every single moment. What I have found when I work with like law students and kind of prepare them, because like this again, being a lawyer is a great job. It is
Yeah.
an amazing privilege to be an attorney and to be a fiduciary, to actually represent somebody and put their interests ahead of yours. It's very important, but you have to learn how to do that. Some people, maybe like you naturally can compartmentalize and say that this is bad. It's not the end of the world. But there are others who can't, and they don't know about
Yeah.
it. So with
Yeah.
my classes, when we talk like really catastrophic cases, it's not just the law. We focus on the facts. We look at the pictures. We have to understand, like, this is what happens. And you can see how, when you stare into that long enough and you look at what happened to the plaintiffs, you can see how jurors might say, oh, here's a bunch of money. So I want to kind of, as we look at your building up this department, how big does the claims department get under your watch?
So just to clarify, the department had sort of already been built out when I got there, but I was the first sort of lawyer that kind of came on in that sort of national coordinating
I
role.
see.
While I was at the years that I was at US Express, roughly all totaled, there were probably, so we had a call center that operated, 24/7, 365. The drivers, when they were involved in an accident, would call into that number. And then we had your physical damage team, your subrogation team, your workers' comp, your cargo, and your property damage and BI teams. I'm going to guesstimate probably it always was around 50. I don't really remember fully the numbers, but probably around 55 people in the
Wow.
department. Yeah. During my 17 years there.
Now,
So
when you got a chance to go in-house, like many, again, private lawyers are like, that's the goal. Like that, if they could get in-house, like that is the greatest thing in the world. What were some of the things you really enjoyed about the world of in-house counsel?
well, I didn't have to write down my time anymore.
I knew it. I knew it. Same with me. Same with me.
Yeah, I didn't have
One
to write
client,
down
I'm
my
fine.
time anymore. And I had one very demanding client, but I believed in the mission of that client, right? I was all in. And I think part of that had to do with the fact that, as I mentioned, my grandfathers were delivery truck drivers, but they were drivers nonetheless. And but the other thing that I liked about in-house work was because I was part of the, I guess I'll describe it as the business strategy of
Yeah,
it.
absolutely.
So conversations around, should we adopt this particular safety technology, or we're thinking about making a change to our hiring guidelines, or we are thinking about possibly acquiring this other company, so parts, that sort of piece of it, and being part of the larger enterprise of how we are going to grow our trucking business, how we are going to be the best trucking company that we can be. took me outside of the traditional courtroom lawyer.
I think it resonates with me because when I was private practice, and now I am private practice, but I was general counsel for a few years at a really great company. When you're in your private counsel, your outside counsel, you're presented with something and they're saying, "Hey, this happened. Can you fix it?" And it's like, "Oh, okay. Let me work on fixing this." When you're in house, it's more of we have strategy, we have thoughts. In the world of a private practice, it's law is the top priority. In-house, it's one of the things we consider. Like, it's important. We're going to weigh that in, but we have other businesses that have different units that have different thoughts. And it's liberating. And I think also for me, it allowed you to focus. Like, I'm not worried about this client or that client. I have one client with a lot of issues that we're going to work on. And it gave you this ability to focus. And I love that kind of a piece. And to your first point, it's great not having to bill time. It's so good. It's so good.
Okay.
Now, you are at US Express when this incredible merger takes place. And this incredible merger is this massive behemoth, Knight-Swift, coming.
No.
Oh, no.
I actually left US Express before the merger.
Interesting.
I actually was at the ATA when the merger was consummated.
Okay, so walk me through the time. So when did you go to the
So I left US Express in 2021, August,
Okay.
I think, of 2021, September of 2021, somewhere in there. And I went to Knight-Swift. In the claims world, in there, a small percentage of trucking companies have in-house lawyers and in-house claims staff that are self-handling their accident claims. And so we get to know each other. We have industry meetings. We collaborate, lots of peer networking. And so you get to know each other.
And you get to know one of the biggest of the big. I mean, Knight-Swift is massive.
And so, like, I still, to this day, I'm not trying to drop names. I have colleagues at, all the big trucking companies that I have worked with for, 2 decades now. But anywho, so the team at Knight-Swift, we had a conversation, and I think that role was sort of a unique role. For the first post-COVID, they were really hiring they were trying to build out a universe of claims examiners that dealt with high exposure cases.
I see.
And more problematic litigation. And they were, for the first time, open to having those claims examiners work around the country, not just in headquarters in Phoenix.
I see. So the work from anywhere allowed you to get access to
right.
with one of the best motor carriers that's ever been out there as they navigate this crazy world.
Right. So the idea that I was that I was going to kind of come over and mentor these claims examiners that they were developing in sort of this team of high exposure cases. And then I had a book of particularly difficult, for various different reasons, lawsuits that maybe have been around for a while. Mm-hmm. And so I went over there and did that. And one of the reasons why I did that was because in my mind, it was a way to sort of take a step back and sort of slow down my career a little bit, and maybe take on some new challenges. I was an empty nester at that point. And so just sort of some things in my personal life had changed. And I thought, maybe you want to do something different, slow down a little bit, have a little bit. In my mind, it was less stressful. And because I wasn't managing a whole department or co-managing a whole department.
I see. So. Well, it's fascinating because what we have seen on these verdict sides. So everyone hears this phrase nuclear verdict. And it's not a legal term. It's invented, but it generally means cases that are over $10 million of liability. And then there's like a new version, the thermonuclear, it's over $100 million. And we throw these numbers out, and they're massive numbers. And the increases of these litigation and these verdicts is just every year more and more and more. And when you're a trucking company, can you absorb one of those? Maybe two, maybe four, five, six. I think it gets dicey. And as you kind of outlined with your time at US Express, many big motor carriers now self-insure for the first
Yeah.
like 5 million or 10 million. They have money sitting in a pile that they'll pull on, but then they have the umbrella policy. So you are helping Knight-Swift manage and professionalize this claim department because the liability is so significant. How does the ATA come to you? How does that next phase of your career work?
I had a friend in the industry, and that friend was working on, I think, a specific project or some sort of task. Rich Pianka was the new GC at the American Trucking Associations, and he had been in my role as deputy GC for, I want to say, about 12 years.
Okay.
13 years at the time. And so he moved into the GC role and had to backfill. And a lot of talk at the ATA was on tort reform and lawsuit abuse reform. And sometimes in the trade association world, the folks that come to work at trade associations don't actually come from the industry that they support. They just move from one trade association to the...
Because they're all the same.
Yeah, they're all the same. And I don't mean that critically. I'm just pointing that out. And so there was conversation around, maybe, Pam, you have a lot of opinions about what's going on in these courtrooms, tort reform, judicial, state judges, judicial elections, lots of opinions about that. Maybe you channel that energy and opinion in a different way. And so my friend really encouraged me to apply for the job. I had met Rich over the years, and so I think he may have casually known about me, and I certainly knew who he was. And we connected and had a conversation, and I formally applied, and the rest is history.
So the transition from going from like being in-house counsel, big trucking operation, to being kind of the advocacy arm for the industry, how has that changed? Like, what's the different lifestyle? Because you're not billing time, I would imagine.
Not billing time. So it's definitely a different kind of advocacy. So my role is very external. I work closely with our Federation of State Trucking Associations. There's 50 of them because we have 50 states. And I really tell people that my clients are those trucking associations. My focus areas are tort reform, predatory towing reform, also laws that touch upon cargo security. And so I read legislation and edit legislation. I write legislation.
Wow.
I write white papers. I write op-eds. I do speak publicly a lot, not just at state trucking associations have annual meetings. So not just at their annual meetings, but I speak other organizations, like the TIDA, the Trucking Industry Defense Association. I was their state of the industry speaker at their annual meeting in 2024. So I'm asked to speak by other groups about generally those topics. And I talk a lot about what I experienced, what I observed about plaintiffs' trial attorneys, and kind of their, how they approach their strategy when they're suing a trucking company. And I talk about tort reform, and I talk about a lot of things. I guess I have a lot of opinions, Matthew, and so they're probably all worth about 2 cents. But
Well,
that's what I do.
It's incredible because I think again for the folks that are not lawyers, right? We touched on in the very beginning of this conversation about like plaintiff attorneys versus defense attorneys, and it's like a cat and mouse game. But when you're talking verdicts of $100 million, a plaintiff attorney will take 1/3 of that if it's collectible ultimately. So this is
They
like
might even take 40% of that.
oh yeah, I should go back into plaintiff
Could
work.
take a little bit more than 40% too, but that's another conversation maybe.
These lawyers, they can retire off of one case. And
Yes.
my worry about our industry, for there's a lot of things I worry about, but some of the things I worry about is defense attorneys don't have specialization in transportation. Like it's different from doing an auto liability case and doing a big truck case. And insurers don't pay great. Like as a lawyer who's worked with insurers and works directly with clients and everything, like insurance companies are not known as being like the best rates you can get. Like I had workers' compensation attorneys who would get paid less than my diesel mechanics, just as an example. So how do we as an industry like address this massive threat of liability, knowing the plaintiff's bar has the ability to make way more money than you can working as a defense attorney in a shop that you're just churning and burning cases 15 hours a day? Like, what do we do in that kind of circumstance?
So that's where I think smaller fleets are at a disadvantage because smaller fleets don't have in-house claims departments and they're not self-handling their claims and they don't have choice of defense counsel. The truth is for the larger fleets that are, like you said, self-insured, have some type of high retention endorsement, are managing their own claims, they are choosing specialized transportation defense attorneys. Yep. So there are defense attorneys that have that niche and have pretty much they might have other clients maybe in the products liability space, but basically they are litigating truck wreck cases.
Okay, this is what gets me so excited because like this is where I'm going to geek out. So for anyone who's listening to us through the podcast or watching us live, this is going to be like lawyer nonsense. So if you're not interested in the law, like it's okay. But I look at this and go, okay, for small motor carriers, minimum insurance you have to carry is $750,000. Now sometimes shippers require more; they'll say we want $1 million, but ultimately there's not a single small motor carrier that could absorb a massive verdict. That they get hit, they go bankrupt, they just do it again. So like there's this, like to your point, like the smaller carriers are at a disadvantage unless their strategy is bankruptcy and doing it again.
Right.
And what we're seeing on this new front for the freight brokers out there is this strange circuit split among F4A preemption or broker liability, where you have the 7th and the 11th on one side saying brokers aren't responsible, the 6th and the 9th saying brokers can be responsible. What are you thinking as you look at this? Like, should brokers be investing more in claims departments because now maybe they're going to be responsible? Like, how do you see this playing out?
Well, there's the lawyer in me, and then there's I guess the realist in me. So the lawyer in me says that brokers shouldn't have this should not be their fight, right? Liability should not be imposed on a broker. And so I'm hopeful that one day the Supreme Court will take this up and sort of reconcile and definitively say what the law is, since we have the split in the circuits. Now, are there brokers that don't have good internal controls so that they really are sort of functioning more like they're controlling the carrier rather than truly at an arm's length contracting with the carrier? Absolutely. And they might want to think about those internal controls.
But that's like co-employment versus just negligent hiring.
Right. So, but the realist in me says, I don't know when this is going to happen. And I certainly don't have a crystal ball on how the Supreme Court would decide when it ultimately decides to take up this issue. And so the realist in me says, yeah, brokerages, you probably need some specialized in-house claims people that are really thinking through your agreements, how your contracts push off and require other people to indemnify and defend you, what your internal controls are, and then having staff that are working with any outside insurance companies that you might have in your tower to coordinate the defense.
This is one of the things I was so excited to talk to you about, because as you built and managed, professionalize these claims departments to be prepared for these big verdicts that we don't want to see happen, but they continue to happen. And to your other point about brokers ought not to be liable, I am of the same opinion of you. Unfortunately, the Ninth Circuit and the Sixth Circuit disagree with us. And what ends up happening is these brokerages don't have the processes or the systems or the people to navigate these things. I mean, let alone ask for choice of counsel. Like, they probably may not even have insurance for these things. And I was talking with, I talked with a lot of different lawyers, and I have come, like, at least in my just general kind of tally, there's well over 1,000 major broker liability cases percolating in the US, not just in federal courts, but state courts. So one of the things I love about the ATA is that when you guys have a position on something, you're vocal about it. We are now seeing a couple cases getting appealed to SCOTUS and asking for certiorari. Again, for the folks who aren't lawyers, you don't just get to go to the Supreme Court of the United States. Some cases do if it's like states fighting with each other, but generally you ask them to take it and they say, maybe. Do you see the ATA trying to push or write amicus briefs saying, hey, this is something we as an industry care about? Or how do you think there's any role to play for the ATA in that?
I do think that there is a role to play, but the ATA is obviously membership driven. And so in terms of our full membership, we are asset-based companies, right? We're not brokerage firms. That's brokerage firms, true brokerage and freight forwarder firms are usually a member of TIA, Transportation Intermediaries Association. That doesn't mean that some of our members have brokerage business units or divisions.
Exactly.
And so they have the asset piece and then they have the brokerage piece. And then some of our members are probably the smaller carriers to whom loads are being brokered by the brokerage firms. And so they definitely care about this. But since we are a membership-driven organization, they're going to list their priorities to us through our process, through our policy committees, in the manner that impacts them in a manner that makes sense for them. And at this time, that issue is not something that we put into a sort of a tier 1 strategic priority. Now, in terms of what we do at the ATA Litigation Center with amicus briefs, yeah, I do think that there could be a case where we could be asked to come in and we look at that and say, yeah, we do think we should weigh in on that.
I think I agree completely. I think ultimately the brokers and the motor carriers can all agree on tort reform. I mean, we have that Wabash case that has everyone's mind, where a trailer made in 2004 gets rear-ended by someone who is allegedly drunk and not wearing a seatbelt, dies, and then the initial verdict is $462 million. It gets brought down to 100 something. But in any event, we do all agree that tort reform is necessary. My hope, and since I'm not part of the ATA members, you should care deeply about what happens with broker liability. You absolutely should, because we all want to make sure that if the federal government does not have a uniform approach to how these things get regulated on a liability standpoint, we all get hurt. We all get hurt for that. Just because some brokers are held liable in some circuits and some aren't in other circuits, I would love to see uniformity across the board. Even if it is, I don't want to see brokers held liable. I think that's wrong, but I just want to see some clarity in this space. And to the brokers listening, you should probably call Pam. You should probably call them and say, hey, explain to me how I might be responsible for $100 million verdict, because she would know how to deal with that. All right. So we're getting close on time here. I had so many more questions, but I want to kind of segue to, what are you looking forward to next? So we have a lot of transitions. There's a lot of tariffs, a lot of things going on. What are the biggest things that you see besides tort reform that we as an industry should be thinking about?
That's a lot.
It is.
Yeah, I mean, you've got tariffs and thinking through how this impacts our supply chain and it's the economy, stupid, right? And we've had this administration has brought in a new dawn of the day, a lot of relief in the issue of electric vehicles, advanced clean fleet, advanced clean truck, CARB, EPA. So that's really sort of lightened a stressor on a lot of trucking companies around what does that look like. So we have had a lot of successes. This administration also, is going to be helpful in terms of keeping the independent contractor model, which is important. Hopefully we can get positive conversations around truck parking, because we have a real problem with the number of available parking spaces out there for our drivers. I just see a lot of opportunity. I don't know that, I have to admit a little bit of, I am kind of a one-trick pony. I really do think that there's been a lot of positive stuff in tort reform. And so I kind of just really get most excited still about that, because I think there's a lot of good conversations to have, and really very excited about the implications of the Werner verdict.
Yeah.
From the Supreme Court. And
Great.
what that might, because Texas is a judicial hellhole.
It
And
is.
so what that might do for leveling the playing field in Texas, and how trucking companies might start seeing some of the aggressive litigious nature of some of the attorneys in Texas kind of slow their roll, have a chilling effect,
And again, for the folks who aren't lawyers, judicial hellhole is a term of art. It is described specific places that you just don't want to be caught in as a defendant. Now, I think it's interesting, and I want to get your thoughts on this. So one of the things the current administration has kind of really looked more into, two things specifically. One is driver qualification, specifically English language proficiency. For those who have been following, this has been the law since the 1930s. We just enforce it differently. So that's one really interesting aspect. And the other one is, I don't know if I'd say targeting is the right word, but doing more research into the driver training schools across the country. Who is getting through the doors and operating on our highways? Do you see maybe a resurgence in better enforcement of driver qualification, or do you think it's more political grandstanding, and it'll be the same as it's always been?
I think there's opportunities for better enforcement, and I hope that it doesn't devolve into political grandstanding.
Yeah.
And that's Pam Bracher's personal opinion. What I would say is that, like with the English language proficiency, there's still some uncertainties. And my concern there is that you're going to have different states doing different state DOTs doing different things when they are, testing somebody to see whether or not they're proficient. And that always concerns me. There's a lot of things in our country where you have different, in torts are an example of this, where state law differs. So you have a different set of rules over here from here. And there are pros and cons when you have that kind of patchwork. But one of the cons is the potential that some people might abuse it and for their own means. For example, I'll be quite honest, again, this is me personally, concerns that some people may enforce it in a racist way.
Yeah, that is certainly a concern. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But I think, like, from my perspective, our supply chain has a lot to be excited about and a lot of things to be concerned with. And one of the things that always gets me motivated is the out of service rate for commercial vehicles. So even if the administration says we're going to work on English language proficiency and take a couple thousand people out of the pool, I still look and go, like, the national out of service rate's 20%. Like, if you go out on the road and look at trucks and trailers and you say, why are they out there? And like, I use the analogy, if I was a milk vendor, a grocer, and I had 5 gallons of milk, and I said, one of them is unsafe, you'd say, Matt, I would prefer not to buy any milk from you at all. And I'd say, that's not your choice. So we have this thing has always been the case, but what we're looking at in the future, and I think you're probably one of the most qualified people to answer this, is the rise of autonomous trucks. They're mostly operating intrastate, so they're not necessarily crossing state lines. And FMCSA, as far as I'm aware, hasn't made any final rules or even proposed rules on this remote operator, remote assistant. But where do you see that going? And how do you think in a claims mindset, what do you do with an autonomous truck if it's involved in an accident?
Well, I think the biggest problem right now is that technology is outpacing the law. So the law that exists on the books at the different states don't really sort of conceive of the autonomous vehicle. There's still the laws that exist, common law or statutorily, are for the most part still you have a human being in the driver's seat that's driving it. And so there needs to be a level set there, right? We need to start thinking through what do our laws need to say to sort of connect, to have it catch up with where technology is. But there is clearly, to me, a larger voice of the products liability community in this conversation. It's not just traditional negligence. What did the driver do? Because now it's about how the car or vehicle was programmed. What does the software look like? What is the code? What should it have done? And so those really speak to traditional products liability law.
I couldn't agree with you more. I have talked to a number of autonomous vehicle manufacturers over the years, and the way they've characterized it is they say there's actually going to be more insurance available because, to your point, there's going to be product liability from the manufacturer of the truck, liability on the product side for the developer of the software. There's going to be the sensor people who make the sensors, whether it's the same or not. The person who maintains the sensor, has that been inspected and working properly? The motor carrier will remain the primary one for negligence. So it's their job to maintain the asset. So even if it looks like it's a gray area, and I think you're right. I think the technology has outpaced our ability to regulate it. There is a framework that I see. What I love about autonomous vehicles is you cannot have a vehicle at a service rate of 20%. That no one will say, we can have a couple of them work and a couple of them not. Like, that's okay. It's going to be like an airplane, 99% or more in perfect working condition. And maybe that's what we need. I mean, as we talked before we went on the program, like, is there a driver shortage? Is there a driver retention issue? And we know there's a lot of drivers who need jobs and a lot of people who are hiring, and it just kind of goes back and forth. But the jobs that seem to be the ones that have the highest turnover are you're away from your family for half the year. And that might be where automation finds value. So I'm excited to see what happens. Will you come back when we get some proposed rules from the FMCSA and let me know what you think?
I will come back whenever you would like me to come back, even though your audience may think I'm boring. But yes, I will be happy to come back whenever you would like me to come back.
Well, Pam, I am so excited to have you. I want to ask one last question before I say goodbye. And that is, like, if you have advice for the tens of thousands of people who just took the bar exam, they're not going to know any results for the next 2-3 months. Are there any advice you'd give to them in navigating the period of uncertainty?
I was trying to just momentarily think about, when I was studying for the bar, and I really think that I shortchanged myself on taking a break. So I studied for the bar, I took the bar, and then I immediately went to work for Miller & Martin. And I really don't remember having an extended break. I'm talking maybe 2-3 weeks, 4 weeks, maybe. So I guess my advice would be, if you can pay your rent and still buy groceries, take a break.
That is fantastic advice, Pam. I will make sure to link your LinkedIn page in the show notes. Is that the best place for people to get a hold of you?
Yeah, for sure.
Well, I cannot thank you enough. So, Pam, I'm going to say a quick little outro. Stick around for a minute if you can afterwards, okay?
Yeah.
All right, everybody. That is it. Once more unto the breach, the Armchair Attorney podcast, bringing you something unique and interesting, I hope. Being a lawyer is not easy. You don't do this because it's easy. You do this because you see a passion for advocacy and being a resource and a fiduciary to the people that need you. All across America, people, men and women, are safely delivering freight on time and undamaged. It is difficult even under the best circumstances, and it is rarely the best circumstances. I hope this episode was useful to you. Like I said, we're calling it office hours. We're going to bring in some lawyers, talk about their journeys and how they have found a thriving career in the law, whether they're practicing every single day or they're doing other things in advocacy or they're doing work internally as an in-house counsel. I have to always end with a great thank you to the people and the companies that keep us operating. My friends over at DAT, there you go, DAT, Dial a Truck, 1978, helping motor carriers discover more freight on a tear. In the last 10 months, they have purchased trucker tools, Outgo, factoring, and then Convoy platform from Flexport. Kristen, I'm coming for you. You're going to be on the podcast sooner than later. Thank you to my friends at Genlog, setting a new standard of care for freight intelligence. Cameras all around, monitoring, watching, judging me. Am I doing okay? I certainly hope so. Ryan Joyce, I know you're watching. I know you pay attention to me screaming on the internet about the law. This supply chain needs you to understand how it works. It is not easy. It is not an easy thing by any means. But if you can understand what's happening, you have the ability to influence it. Robot trucks are coming. Get ready. We'll see you next time on the Armchair Attorney Podcast.